Good morning. We're looking now, good morning, Maggie, at the Rebbe's explanation for what we learned yesterday. Yesterday, we learned the first 10, 15 lines of chapter 41, Perek Aleph of Tanya. And essentially, the point there is that the foundation, beginning, and root, all serving Hashem, is the acceptance, this awe, which inspires an acceptance of divine sovereignty. God is in charge, I follow instructions. What's the thinking that leads to that? He explained that Hashem is infinite, fills the space of the entire world, transcends all worlds, but he uniquely, notwithstanding all that, he uniquely singles out the Jewish people to be his subjects, and me in particular. And as such, because Hashem chooses me to be his subject, I in return say, yes, sir, I am your subject, and I do all things that Hashem instructs. And that becomes the foundation. And then the Alter Rebbe concluded that section by saying, God stands above the person and wants to know, how is he doing? Are you keeping up your part of the deal? Are you serving me as you have accepted you to be my subject? Which, of course, inspires you to even deeper reverence in our serving of Hashem, because you're in God's presence, not just serving a king that's miles away. Okay, so now let's see how the Rebbe unpacks these lines. What we're looking at is it's a sikha in Likutei Sichos. Likutei Sichos means that these are transcripted talks of the Rebbe, but they've been edited for publication. So there are transcripts that are not edited, raw transcripts, and these are transcripts that are edited. Now this is in the Hosfot. Hosfot is like appendix, addendums at the back of the book, which make this a little bit different. The actual sichos that are in Likutei Sichos, the actual sichos that are in the book proper, these selected, that's what Likutei Sichos means, selected at talks, right? So sometimes they're a combination of a few talks, but they're turned into like essay form. So they're not written in the style that you would be speaking. They're written in the style that you'd be writing, even though it's transcripts of talk, because they've been reworked to be published as essays. So they're heavily annotated with footnotes and sources and cross-references and analysis, and it reads like an essay. The Hosfot here, this talk we're reading now, reads more like a transcript. It is edited, but it reads more like a transcript. But if you're familiar, it's more in the style of Sefer Sichos than it is Likutei Sichos. So what that means is you're going to hear the Rebbe's voice in it, not just his ideas, but the way he speaks as well, because the style is written like a transcript rather than an essay. Okay, so this is how it reads. It's in the right of 292, where it says Tez Zayin. There's Shir in Tanya. The section of Tanya, was men vet be'ezes Hashem lernen heint bei Nacht, which will be taught tonight auf die radio, on the radio. There was a Shir Tanya on the radio, and Rebbe spoke a lot about it. Rebbe had a lot to do with it. Rebbe helped the one who delivered the Shir on the radio edit his notes. That's what Lessons in Tanya is. The book Lessons in Tanya is mostly from these radio shiurim with the Rebbe's comments. So here they were speaking about, and the radio show was Motzei Shabbos, and here at the Shabbos Fabregan, they were speaking about what they're going to be teaching on the radio. So tonight's shiur that they're going to be teaching on the radio is Ascholas Perek Aleph, is the beginning of Perek Aleph. That's what they're going to be teaching on the radio tonight.
And the Rebbetzin used to listen.
The Rebbetzin used to listen?
They say, Azoy Zachman.
I think it's Tashich of Hey, right? Look at the end, the last page of the Sikha. Tell me the last page of the Sikha. What does it say? Parshas Noach, what year? Doesn't say at the end? I think it's Tashich of Hey. Right, Chiluk Hey came out then. I think it's Tashich of Hey, which is 1965.
Every page on the top says which Sikha.
Where?
On the top of the page.
It looks
293.
Right? Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay. So explains, says the Rebbe. Was dort retzich, there in chapter 41 it speaks of, in dem inyan in welchem en kocht zich en kama v'kama pamim. It relates an idea that we are very involved with, and we've spoken about it many times. Nachdem was men hat schon durchgelernt, 40 kapitlach, after having read or learned 40 chapters, right, chapter 41. So after having learned 40 chapters, in welches wird mevor, in which it's explained in these 40 chapters, how it is indeed, as the verse says, it is indeed very close and near to everyone to serve Hashem with his whole heart and speaking and acting for Hashem. Right, this is the pasuk that Tanya is based on. After these 40 chapters, now we arrive at chapter 41. It speaks new ideas that haven't been mentioned until now. Biz, so much so, in Yonam Lefloyim, amazing things. In chapter 41, was in die 40 prakim retzich das nit begoloi, which in the previous 40 chapters, it is not written explicitly. These amazing things that are spoken about in 41 are not spoken about in the first 40 chapters. Was Bechlal is azois in yeder perek. The truth is, every perek has to be treated that way, or is that way. As an aim, in each chapter, something new is brought to the table of tefillah keprakim, which is not there in the previous chapters. Okay. Hasalas haperek, the beginning of the chapter, is mendar visin, that a person has to know. Quote, at the beginning of one service, the primary service, and the root of one service, we spoke about those 3 languages yesterday. And that is, Yira and Kabbalah Samach Shemayim, the awe, the fear, the reverence of heaven, and the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. That's the beginning, that's the primary, and that's the root. And we have to always remember this. That at the root and the core and our foundation is accepting Hashem as king. When Erez Mevayer these bonus, and he explains there, the consideration was bring to them, which brings about this accepting of Hashem as sovereign. As the that even though Hashem finds himself everywhere, he puts away the upper worlds and the lower worlds, and he singles out the Jewish people as a whole to be their sovereign. Okay. This alone, it doesn't really take the person, the person who's considering all this, as is required. So even though he knows Hashem runs the entire world, and he sets all that aside because he chooses the Jewish people, but that's not enough for him. Why? Because there's lots of Yidden. King Yirbu, may God bless it to be more Jews. Without me. Which they accept upon themselves the yoke of Hashem. And they declare God, the singularity of God's sovereignty. Why is it so important that one more person accept upon himself the yoke of heaven, me in particular? There's lots of Jews. We hear this all the time. Judaism is going on, Lubavitch is going on. It's okay. I don't have to do. It's fine. There's lots of Jews. There's lots of people. They're all doing what Hashem asks. So okay. So I won't be as particular. Why is it so important? So as Moshe the Alter Rebbe, therefore the Alter Rebbe adds va'alav befrat. Right, the Alter Rebbe writes, Hashem singles out. He puts aside the upper worlds and the lower worlds and says, "I feel all this. Not interested. I want to be king of the Jewish people." And then the Alter Rebbe adds, on this person, the person thinking in particular. As the Eibush is miyachem malchusof in befrat, Hashem singles out his sovereignty on this particular person. Says Negeah as heirs on makabel zayin of zich or malchusei barach. It's important that he accept upon himself the sovereignty of heaven. So already the Rebbe is adding this language. Says Negeah, it's important, meaning not only as we're let's say you could have learned the chapter on its own, that the fact is Hashem is watching you and is your king. So you have to, here there was adding, no, it's important to Hashem that you're a king, that he's your king. This idea that Hashem puts aside the world and chooses the Jewish people, and then of the Jewish people, Hashem chooses you in particular to be his king, it's important that you do that. not just as a net result, because Hashem is your king, therefore you should accept. But it's important that you accept. This is Negeya. Okay? That goes even further. A person might make the mistake of thinking, as love befrat, that when Tanya says that Hashem singles him out to be his sovereign, means the Erez Achelik from Klal Yisrael. This person as part of the totality of the Jewish people. It's only important that he join the group. Hashem is sovereign of the Jewish people. You are part of the Jewish people, so it's important that you are part of the Jewish people, but not because of who you are as an individual, but only because you are a part of the totality of the Jewish people. It says that Rebbe Chach, as for Lashon is mashma netazai, even though the precise language of the Tanya does not imply this way, it implies you in particular, not just you as part of the group. Why? V'romer zoktach, he says, umi yachid, and he singles, miloshin yachid in a singular form. So look at the text again. How does he say it? He says that Hashem he sets aside the higher world and the lower worlds, and he singles out his sovereignty in the singular on the Jewish people as a total and on him in particular, the person thinking. So that's number one, why it's in the singular, not just in a group. Number two, and this word, and he singles out, it's not he singles out his sovereignty on the Jewish people as a whole, including him. It's he singles it out on the Jewish people as a whole and on him. Meaning this word, and he singles out, goes to the next two statements, on the Jewish people as a whole and on him. Right? Meaning it could have read in theory, he singles out his sovereignty on him. Right? Because there's the and. Right? The word miyached, Hashem singles out his sovereignty on whom is not on the Jewish people, including you, on the Jewish people, and another thing that he singles his sovereignty out on is you. Right? So the precise language should be enough not to make the mistake of thinking that you're only important because you're part of the totality of the Jewish people. So was from them is move on. So from this is understood from this language as yeder yachid is negeya mitzad atzmai. Each individual is important on his own. Nit nor mitzad dem was erzatel from der klal, and not simply because he's a part of the group. And nonetheless, the person reading might have learnt it incorrectly and a little bit squeezed the language, as thus meant man the erez achelik from klal, thinking that he's only important because of him being part of the Jewish people as a whole. You could have thought that. And therefore, even though the language precisely written implies Hashem wants you as an individual, it's important that you as an individual accept Hashem's sovereignty. The Alter Rebbe adds, to make it clear, is Moisif ad Morazokin. The Alter Rebbe adds, Raya l'dvarav, first of all, as a proof that it's important that each individual take upon himself the sovereignty of heaven. As well as to negate this mistake of thinking that you're only important as part of the group. As the Alter Rebbe, key, because, good morning, welcome back. Thus, as darf sein, thus was as darf sein these bonus. The reason why there has to be, or the requirement to have this consideration that Hashem fills the entire world, but he sets it all aside to single out you to be his subject, is this vile chayev adam lemer b'shvili never olam. The Gemara says every person is obligated to say the entire world is made for me. So the Gemara has an obligation on the individual to say that the world is created for me. And therefore each person is required to consider and to contemplate the fact that Hashem singles him out to be his subject, him as an individual. So that unpacks this more. This commandment from our sages, that a person is obligated to say that the world is created for me, but the Alter Rebbe breakdown in Tanya, which the Alter Rebbe is quoting here now in chapter 41, is in Mishnah Sanhedrin. It's in the Mishnah, in the end of chapter 4 of Sanhedrin. We had more at Tzemach Tzedek Zeichen zu Evangelium from Tanya. As the Alter Rebbe, at the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe's grandson, writes in the margins of the Tanya that this is the source. This is just on the side. This is classic Rebbe. It's not enough that the Mishnah exists in Sanhedrin to be proof that that's where the Alter Rebbe got it from. No, what's the Rebbe's proof that the Alter Rebbe means the Mishnah in Sanhedrin? Because Tzemach Tzedek writes it in the margins. Everything has to be like exact. It doesn't take it for granted. The Tzemach Tzedek writes in the margins. This is the source. Oh, this is the source. Okay. The Tzemach Tzedek's notes are published in a book of notes called Kitzurim Va'aras Latanya. If I remember correctly, Rebbe once handed it out. It's a blue book. Rebbe once, like, with his own hands, stood in 770, giving out this booklet to the crowd. Amongst other books, Rebbe did that, but Rebbe chose this one to give the crowd. Okay, and the Mishnah dort, that's wegen, jeder Eden als Yachid. The Mishnah there, which says that each person is obligated to say the world is created for me, is speaking about each individual as an individual, not just as part of the group. Or nit als das was is a prat from the Klal Yisrael, and not just because he happens to be an individual amongst the Jewish people. The Mishnah there means the individual, as we'll presently explain. Is von dem was der Alter Rebbe bringt der Lashon Mishnah auf Vala befrat. And the fact that the Alter Rebbe brings this Mishnah, which says every person is obligated to say the world is made for me, as proof for the statement that Hashem singles out him in particular to be his subject, is that in Klal we see clearly as their meinta that the Alter Rebbe's intention is here, as der Eibishter is miyached malchusay of jeder Eden as yachid. That Hashem singles his sovereignty to be uniquely positioned on each individual as they are an individual, independent of the fact that they happen to be part of the Jewish people. So now let's see how the Rebbe gets this from the Mishnah. The Mishnah dort sagt. The Mishnah says there, as follows. The full quote in the Mishnah, part of which the Alter Rebbe does not quote. Lefichach nivra adam yechidi lelamdacha. The reason why, says the Mishnah, that man was created in the singular, right? All other creations were created in multitudes. All cows are created with a bunch at one time, certainly rocks and grass and so on. But Adam Arishan was created as a single individual, not even two. Right? He was created as a singular and then only divided into two afterward. So says the Mishnah, why is it that man was created in the singular and not many humans at once, like all other creatures? It's to teach you, says the Mishnah, to teach you that each individual is a full world. In other words, the world is complete after Adam Arishan is complete, because that's it. That's the whole world. That's all of humanity. Right? When it comes to the cows, the individual cow is not the pinnacle of creation. So in order for creation to be full, you have to have many cows. But in order for creation to be full, how many humans do you have to have? One. So each human is the whole world. That's what the Mishnah says. When there is Messiah, and the Mishnah concludes, Lefichach, therefore, because Hashem creates one individual to teach you. That one individual is the entire world. Therefore, therefore, each person is obligated to say the world is created for me.
That's the source of Bishvili Niv'Olam.
This is the source. This Mishnah. Rebbe asks, seemingly, what kind of comparison is this? Adam Arishan indeed was the whole world. Factually. There's only one person. But because he was alone. He had no one else to rely on. Not in the upper worlds, not in the lower worlds. It was on him alone to achieve divine sovereignty. Because there's nobody else. Then it's that's but when we're speaking about a Jew living in later generations, me and you, then says when there are many Yidden, God should grant there should be more, even without me. And all those other people, they're all fulfilling Hashem's mission. Is Vikim and Zogin, as thus was Nivra Olam, is this Narbish Viloi? So how could you say that the whole world is created just for me? I'm not alone in the world. So Adam Arishan is created alone, so he can conclude that the whole world is created for him. But therefore, I have to conclude that. There's millions of people, there's millions of Eden, and they're all doing good things. Why am I so important? Die Kavane kann sich durch ausführen und durch ein andere. Hashem's mission will happen with someone else. Right? Like, what's going to happen if I don't do everything I have to? Okay, the world's going to go on. Hashem's plan will happen. There's lots of good Jews. Judaism will continue. Chassidus will continue. Lubavitch will continue. It's okay. I don't have to. Zok the Mishnah name. Says the Mishnah no. In them is yeder einer gleich Adam Rishon. In this respect, every individual is equal to Adam Rishon. As if you're the only human on the planet. Moreover, leficha, therefore, it's not simply Adam Rishon was alone, so he was the pinnacle of creation, and the rest of us are just offshoots. It's the reverse. Why was Adam Rishon created alone? Not because he alone is important, but to teach you a message that you're important. Lefichach, das was Adam Rishon is never yechidi. The reason why Adam Rishon was created alone is not simply because he was the most important thing in all of creation. Is lelamdecha. Hashem did to teach you. So that every individual in the generations that come, that he should know that you are the whole world. The world's created for you. So it's the other way around. It's not Adam Rishon was the most important, so he was created alone, and everybody else would tag along. No. Actually, you're the most important thing in the world. And that's why Adam was created alone, to teach you that you're the most important in the world. Right? And just as Adam Rishon's service of Hashem was important as an individual, not part of a group, because there was no group, so it is the work and the service of every individual is important as an individual. And not just considering the fact that he's also part of a group. But as an individual, what you do is important. And that's why Adam Rishon was created. Top of the second column, 293. From here we get another instruction. One could think, good, very good. It's true, what I do is important as I am an individual. What's it important to? Okay, so it's important that I, individual, do what I have to. But for what? It's important to whom? For what? To what end? So you might think, it's important for my immediate circle, for my immediate world. And what I achieve in my little circle is important as an individual, not just part of the group. But you might have assumed that the importance that I take upon myself, the sovereignty of heaven, is important just for my little part of the world. But it's not important for the whole world. For this, the Alter Rebbe says, as the Mishnah, as there is glass to Adam Rishon. You're comparable to Adam Rishon. Just as what Adam Rishon did was important for the entire world, and not just for this world, the physical world. No, it was important for all worlds, the spiritual ones as well. As through Adam Rishon accepting upon himself the yoke of divine sovereignty, he achieved that all the worlds should be elevated, because they all came to their purpose finally, including the spiritual realms, and on the opposite end, God forbid, through Adam Rishon's sin, he caused all the worlds to be lowered, to descend. Even in the loftiest of worlds, has been denigrated by Adam Rishon's actions. Even though we're told that Atzilus has no bad, there's no such thing as bad in Atzilus. There's no such thing as non-godly. So how could a sin have any effect there? Nonetheless, however we explain it, the fact is that Adam Rishon's sin affected the world of Atzilus too. Because all of existence, including the highest of spiritual worlds, is dependent on Adam Rishon's action. Okay, I think we'll stop here, even though we're like in the middle of a thing, but we'll pick up tomorrow morning, God willing. I hope you're getting a sense of, beyond the explanation that the Rebbe is giving in the Tanya here, is the Rebbe's language, and the way the Rebbe expresses it.
I think that's everything in Yiddish.
The Rebbe speaks in Yiddish. A lot of the essays have been translated into Hebrew or English. The transcripts, even the transcripts, there's actually transcripts translated to Hebrew as well and English. But this one happens to be is transcript into Yiddish. I hope you're getting the Rebbe's voice, right? In other words,
Good job.
no,
Sounds like it.
I don't mean that voice. I mean the sense of the Tanya is written a little bit. It could be read clinically, right? Like the Alter is giving you a formula. Hashem runs the whole world. You put it aside. Consider that Hashem wants to be your king, and therefore you have to stand there as if you're in the palace of the king, and therefore you have to tremble while you're following Hashem's instructions, right? But when you hear the Rebbe talking about it, the way the Rebbe speaks about it is, highlighting the fact that it's you that's important, and Hashem is standing there and waiting for you to happen, and the entire world is resting on your shoulders, and everybody, it's all comes down to you as an individual. You have to do you. It's important that you yourself take upon yourself the sovereignty of heaven, and all of creation that ever was and ever will be is waiting for that. And not just because you happen to be a Jew, but because you were uniquely chosen to be Hashem's subject. You hear that come out in the way the Rebbe talks about it. We're going to see even more. The Rebbe is actually going to change the translation of one of the words in the coming lines. That's really going to reframe a lot of it. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden. We'll continue tomorrow morning, Be'ezer Hashem.
Shkoyach. Thank you very much.